All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Rise Zion. My name is Seth, and I hope you're all having a fantastic Thursday evening. Welcome to our live stream, everyone. We are so thankful that all of you are here. Before we get started, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Just hit that like button. It will help everybody to know that this live stream is going on. I wasn't able to share this across our social medias before getting started. I just wanted to dive right into it because we have some really interesting news to share with you guys today. This evening, I received a report from one of my viewers, and also this was sent to me from Melissa from Catch the Buzz, and she showed me a link to one of my, to Jonathan Haystack's video that he recently posted. And I believe that it's on the same topic. I haven't watched the full thing yet, but somebody sent me an email today, very, very recently, and they expressed some things in it that were really quite provocative and interesting. And I'm not going to read that email to you today because I haven't been able to confirm all of the details yet, but it is very, very interesting to say the least. I will share some details of it because it kind of forms the basis of kind of the inspiration for tonight's video. We are going to dive into this topic today of the Council of 50. Okay, and I don't know if how many of you have heard of that. You guys can let me know in the chat. I'm seeing some of you pop in right now. Welcome to the channel. I'm glad that you're all here. We'll read your chats coming up in a minute, but just let me know where you're from. Let me know if you have any questions or comments. And if you'd like to make sure that your comment gets read, make sure to send in your super chats, and that will help support the channel. Super chat is just a fun way where you can help contribute to the channel. It's a small payment that you can gift to the channel, and that will make it so that your comment actually appears on the top of the screen, and I can see it for longer and make sure that I actually read that comment. But in any case, let's dive right into this. So I have a little introduction that I wrote for you. The accusation is the darkest in Latter-day Saint history. This has all to do with the Council of 50. In his final months, it is reported that Joseph Smith abandoned the American experiment, established a secret council, and had himself crowned as king, plotting to replace the U.S. Constitution with a theocratic government instead of a democracy. But what if that wasn't just history? A member recently sent us a very interesting letter claiming that an Area 70 revealed that the church no longer has plans for after the next 10 years, that everything must be fulfilled in this time frame, and that the Lord is already preparing his kingdom on earth. And then came another claim, directly linking the ancient kingdom to present day, the Lord calling lawyers to work with the government because when the Savior returns, the constitutional laws will soon be changed. And with President Dallin H. Oaks, a constitutional lawyer and a Supreme Court justice, he would be in perfect position to help rewrite the laws of the Constitution to prepare the world for the second coming. A very, very provocative idea. However, I need to point out that this letter is highly, highly speculative. It's very speculative. I have not been able to confirm any of these details. This is coming from an unnamed source. The original source is actually from a video in South America. I don't even know which country it's from in South America. I know the channel, though. The channel is El Preludio, and it is a Second Coming channel as well. However, I was disappointed that they did not share the name of the 70 who shared this information. And that to me is highly suspect. And not only that, but they didn't share when and where this meeting took place. I try to do that in my letters when I share with you guys, just because I'm not going to share anything with you on this channel that I'm not reasonably certain actually happened. Okay. I get emails all the time from people who will just share stuff with me, and I do not share it with you because I don't find it to be particularly reliable. I need to know what your name is. I need to see your detailed notes from the meeting that took place. I see the detailed notes. I know that you were paying attention to the meeting and that the meeting actually took place. especially if you had everything like hymns and everything like that. And then I need to know the name of the person because I'm always going to report that. As a general authority, they're responsible for the things that they say in their capacity as a leader of the church. And so that's why I always share that, who supposedly said it. And then that also gives them the opportunity to respond. If they didn't actually say it, they can reach out to me and say, hey, I didn't actually say this, and we can correct the record if we know who supposedly said the thing. Okay, so I think that that's very important, and that's a part of the reason why I'm so careful with the things that I share on my channel. In any case, I think that I thought it was very, very interesting what they were saying. It did bring up a lot of interesting ideas in my mind, considering the Council of 50. And I have been studying this topic for the past few days. The idea that the law shall go out of Zion, shall go forth from the mountaintops, right? In Isaiah chapter 2, verse 2. Now, tonight, we search for the answer to the most explosive, controversial document in church history, the minutes to the Council of 50, which were recently released back in 2019, I believe. So this is actually fairly recent. And Joseph Smith actually reportedly ordered that these papers be buried so that the enemies of the church would not be able to find them. So this is a very interesting read, and we're going to see and speculate on the possibility that perhaps President Oaks might be the one to help rewrite the Constitution into a theodemocracy. We'll discuss exactly what a theodemocracy is and see what what that might entail. So yeah, this is going to be a very interesting conversation today. Yes, and RLD Remembrance is saying it is certainly a very provocative idea, considering from my house it shall begin. Well, I think that some people view that verse of scripture as a statement that punishment shall go forth from the house of the Lord. And that kind of ties in together with the Salt Lake City temple dedication as well, which was mentioned in this letter, by the way. They had claimed all sorts of things, like that President Nelson had said that after the temple dedication or the rededication, that would be a time when the glory of the Lord will be revealed in greater abundance, and that Satan would throw his final tantrum, is the word that they used in Spanish. I actually watched the actual original video in the Spanish from a YouTube creator called Carlos, actually, in South America. So it was a very interesting watch, but again, I don't know if I actually believe it yet because I haven't been able to confirm it and haven't been able to get the name of the person who actually supposedly said it. So in any case, this is going to be a very interesting read today. I found this provocative paper. And why it's so important is that a lot of mystery and speculation has been created over the Council of 50. And even from the earliest days of the church, people were saying, that Joseph Smith was trying to overthrow the government, that he was a treasonous traitor, and that he was going to try to establish himself as a king over the United States. Well, all that turned out to be false. And we will read for you the article here. But before we do that, let's go here into the chat and see what you guys are saying about this interesting news. All right. So Lindsay's joined us, says, hello, everyone. Welcome, Lindsay. Angelica has joined us. Hola. Hola, Angelica. From Veracruz, Mexico. Welcome, welcome. Audra Forbes says, hello from Southeast Missouri. Catch the Buzz has joined us. Hello from Boise, Idaho. Welcome, Catch the Buzz. Melissa. Stephanie has joined us from Denver. Lindsay says hello. Lindsay from Phoenix, of course. Deb says from Mississippi. Welcome. Christy says, who is the Council of 50? Where we're going to dive right into that in just a moment. Because the Council of 50 is a separate organization from the church that Joseph Smith formed. So this is a real thing. It's not something that's invented. But let's continue. So Eileen says, Texas 70. Welcome. Lindsay, mind blown emoji. Welcome, Lindsay, again. Luke Sampum. I don't know exactly how to say that name. Hi from Ocotis, Alberta, Canada. Welcome. It's so fun to see where everybody's watching from. We have so many different viewers from all over the world. All right. And then we have, of course, our RLD Remembrance, who has joined us. Jimmy Henry says, hello from Morgantown, West Virginia. House of Israel has joined us. Hi, I'm just going to tell you that I know Christ is coming sooner than most people think. Awesome. I believe that as well. Shauna says hello from Texas. Dee Bronsnan. Sorry, Dee Bronsnahan. Welcome. Okay, I don't know if I'm saying your names correctly, and I apologize if I'm saying them wrong. But they say church and stakes have different jurisdictions. Stake prosecutors harm doers. Okay, church rehabilitates people that harm other people or harm themselves, and it is to provide welfare. Church defines good. Okay, eat broccoli. All right. Not sure exactly where you're going with that. I think I'm kind of seeing you're trying to draw a distinction and a difference between what the government of the church is like as opposed to the government of the world. And I think that that is a good distinction to make for sure. Lindsay says, now that I hear this, it seems familiar to me. I don't know what the source is, though. Yeah, Lindsay, it seems kind of familiar to me as well. It's interesting, isn't it? Dee Bronsnan says, Augusta, Georgia. Welcome from Georgia. That's really fascinating. Okay, and then Scott's Warrior says, oh, what are we talking about? We're talking about the Council of 50 and the possibility that President Oaks might help to rewrite the Constitution in ways that will bring about God's kingdom on earth. So we're going to read today a very fascinating article that I found with regards to these papers that have just been released by the church back in 2019, I believe it was. Okay, so Norma Jean has joined us from Henderson, Nevada. Welcome. And then Michelle from California. Welcome, Michelle from California. We're so glad that all of you have joined us. If you wouldn't mind, make sure to hit the like button before we get started so that other people can find us and know that this live stream is going on. We only have 73 concurrent viewers right at the moment. We want that to be about 200. Yes, a Scottish Warrior says, whose Constitution? The Constitution of the United States, I imagine. However, if it's a new thing, I mean, it might be based on that. It would be kind of interesting to kind of speculate and imagine what could be in store for us in the future, right? Hi from Sandy. I hope we don't have a theocracy. Sounds scary. Well, if it's a theocracy led by Jesus Christ, I think that might be a little bit different. D.D. Bronson says, SCOTUS asks, can state legislate that people eat broccoli with regard to Obamacare? Oh, okay. I don't know if that's true or not, but that is in the schools, I suppose. That might be the case. Catch the Buzz says, House of Israel, amen. Okay, let's get started with this. We need to dive right in to keep people interested in what we're going to be talking about today. So this is the article that I found, you guys. It is Lost Teachings of the Prophets, recently uncovered teachings of Joseph Smith and others from the Council of 50 records. And these are minutes. Oh, this is August 2017, not 2019. I said wrong. The topic that I discussed with Scott, the topic that I discussed with Scott to talk about comes from the newly released Council of 50 notes. As many of you know, the Joseph Smith papers and the Church History Department just recently, several months ago, published the annotated minutes from the Nauvoo era. There are all kinds of insights into early Mormon history as well as late Nauvoo and early Brigham Young history that we get from those minutes. If you haven't had a chance to look them up, it is a really powerful source for people who are interested in history. One of the reasons why is we rarely get to have, from this period of Mormon history, a kind of direct discussion that is kept the entire time they're having it. Often you're getting sometimes some highlights of a discussion, or you are getting what someone kept down as notes, but because William Clayton kept pretty good notes on what was going on, you actually get to see a little bit of what their fears were and what their concerns were and what their angst is. Okay. And this is a very important context in order to understand why Joseph Smith felt inspired to start this Council of 50 in the first place. Okay. And it has to do with religious freedom. I'll give you a little hint. Okay. One of the things that we get out of these documents that we have never before seen in public, we have things that they discussed and say and teachings that they present that have never been public before either. So I thought that might be of at least some interest to you. And if I do a bad enough job Dan bats cleanup away anyway, and you can still leave here feeling good. Okay, very, very good. The Council of 50 originates in early 1844. And for those of you who are really familiar with this period of Mormon history, for someone who studies it for a very long time, just assumes that everyone is really familiar with it because you study it all the time. But this is after Joseph Smith has declared himself to be a candidate for president of the United States. Okay. And very interesting, right? We get this additional context. So Joseph Smith is the very first president candidate who is assassinated while running for political office. Okay. He's the very first in the United States. We continue. In 1843, Joseph has grown increasingly disenchanted with the political parties of the day. I'm sure you are all familiar with Joseph's visit to D.C. to try to get a redress of grievances from Martin Van Buren and from the Congress and the various petitions that they signed. By mid-1842, Joseph seemed to be gravitating toward the Whig Party. Oh, you're pretty desperate if you're going toward the Whig Party at this time. It's like Hufflepuff if you're a Harry Potter fan. And the Whig Party candidate, Henry Clay. Clay was a very well-known politician, the great compromiser, and he was seen as someone who was willing to defend the rights of the minority. I think Joseph had really put a lot of eggs into his basket. At any rate, he decided to abandon the Democratic Party. I know it's really hard to believe, but almost every Mormon in the 1830s and 40s was a Democrat. This movement away is captured a little bit. You see a little bit of Joseph's angst in probably the greatest quote ever given by Joseph Smith, but also the one that now all of you are going to misuse in a high priest group. As he was given this interview to David Nye Weiler of the Pittsburgh Weekly Gazette. He says, quote, I have sworn by the eternal gods that I will never vote for another Democrat again, and I intend to swear my children, putting their hands under the thigh, as Abraham swore Isaac, that they will never vote a Democrat ticket in all their generations. It is the meanest, lowest party in all creation, the lowest, most tyrannical beings in the world. They opposed me in Missouri and were going to shoot me for treason, and I had never committed any treason whatever. From the prairies in Nauvoo, Joseph Smith, the Temple, the Mormons, etc. From the Pittsburgh Weekly Gazette, September 15th, 1843. Again, now you're going to take that out of context and abuse it. You kind of get an idea of how disenchanted Joseph has become with the leadership of the Democratic Party, and he has written letters to all of the declared presidential candidates or all of the people who think they might be running. It is hard to believe that their system for selecting a presidential candidate was even more chaotic and difficult than ours. They simply had state delegations send people to a convention, and then they would argue and bribe and feed people whiskey to try to get votes on the convention floor. You never really knew who was going to be running. Joseph wrote to all the people that had at least expressed interest in running or people who thought they were running, and one by one, they all responded back to him. Not all of them, but the ones that did respond told him that they would not help the Mormons at all if they were to be elected. Finally, one of the ones he received was from Henry Clay. So Joseph goes from thinking he could support Henry Clay as a candidate for president. And Henry Clay said, in a very high-minded, very sympathetic, oh, I feel so badly to see what is happening to your people. But as president, there's nothing I could possibly do to help you out. And, okay. Well, that's lame. So Hufflepuff failed them. The Whig Party failed. After this, Joseph Smith will declare himself to be a candidate for president, earning him the undying hatred of both the Whigs and the Democrats. Okay. So it probably wasn't the best move politically for the Mormons, but it is in this context that Joseph is going to create the Council of 50. Okay. So this is where this all comes from. He has already declared himself a candidate for president, but at the same time, he knows that the church is unlikely to find respite anywhere in the United States. In many ways, the church is looking to leave the United States because they believe American democracy has failed them. They have been in multiple places, and everywhere they go, the very fact of their presence, their power, their political nature, their crazy religious ideas are going to lead to opposition, and that opposition is at times violent and difficult. Okay? So this is really, really fascinating, you guys. I love the way that he's describing it. We get so much wonderful context. And in a different episode, you guys, I actually talked about this, but Joseph Smith had a vision. And he actually wrote in chalk on the ground of the Masonic Hall a map that the saints would take to leave Utah and go into the Rocky Mountains, okay, where the law is supposed to come out from that we're talking about, right? The law will be, how does the scripture go in Isaiah chapter 2, verse 2, that the law will go forth from the tops of the hills or something, and then all of the nations will flow in unto it. You know, that's the quote that supposedly President Nixon said in this letter in reference to President Oaks, that President Oaks would wrap things up, is actually what President Nixon supposedly said, okay, was that President Oaks would be the one to help rewrite the Constitution to such an extent that it would be ready for the second coming. Okay, very fascinating. Okay, it's a very fascinating idea. I don't know if I believe that just yet. Again, this is highly speculative, and we don't know who supposedly said this. It was supposedly a 70 who shared this information. Okay, we continue reading this article, though. Okay, so in his declaration of his views for presidency, we find some odd aspects of it. One of the most interesting is he states in the beginning of it, in the second paragraph, he makes an attack against slavery in the United States, which you would think is a pretty common thing in the 19th century America. No, I didn't think that. We think that in 19th century America, the only thing that they ever talk about is slavery, but it is not actually a major issue amongst most political parties. After 1820, it is rarely discussed on the national scene. You can see this in the 1844 election selection. The two candidates they end up with is Henry Clay, a slave owner from Kentucky, and James Polk, a slave owner from Tennessee. Clearly, no one is taking a very strong stance on this issue. Some newspapers look at Joseph and attack him for being an abolitionist and for speaking out against slavery in this way. Okay, very interesting. Okay, and again, I think that this is so interesting. Joseph Smith was so ahead of his time in terms of being so, so egalitarian in his views of all people of all races. And this was a matter of great contention because the early saints shared his views on this matter, and that was something that the people in Missouri were very afraid of. It wasn't so much, and I think that we've talked about this before on the channel, but the reason why the Saints were driven out of Missouri wasn't so much because of their weird beliefs, although it was partially because of that, but it was mostly because of the political power that they were bringing to that location. Okay, and there was also economic considerations that people were worried about, and they just wanted to get rid of the Mormons. So yeah, it was a very messy thing. And, you know, in the early days of the Constitution, in the early days of this country, the constitutional protections for freedom of religion only protected you from actions taken by the federal government against you and your religion. It did not protect you from state action or from local city action. Okay, so that is something that comes up later in constitutional law where the states were required to follow you know, the states were required to follow the laws of the governing constitution, and that actually came as an amendment much later. You know, also because of the slave issue, is because of the fact that they were trying to pass laws in the state to discriminate against black people again during the civil rights movement, and so they passed these laws saying, hey, you know, the federal government takes precedent. At least I believe that's the case. I could be saying complete things that are just completely wrong, and I don't know the latter constitutional amendments as well as I should. I think it's one of the 21st ones. Somebody out there in the chat, you probably know. Let me know what that was. Yeah, Haystack did a video about this letter, and the video that Seth is referencing. Yes, it's yeah, and it is a very interesting thing. And again, I just want to clarify, I haven't been able to confirm the information yet, but it is very, very interesting. We'll be looking into this much deeper. And if anybody actually has the original source for that, please send it to me, because I want to do research on this a little further, because it's just a very oddly specific thing. So it makes me very suspicious. On one hand, it is very oddly specific, very short. No other notes really taken except for the provocative parts. Any case, let's continue. I've already kind of covered that, but let's continue reading this really fascinating history. So as a part of their discussions about pushing the presidential campaign forward and looking for a place where they might find respite, this is how the Council of 50 is going to be organized and how this record is going to be kept. I want to share with you some insights from it and some teachings that come from it. I will try to leave some time for some questions. Although I guess if you run out of time for questions, you can run off the stage and no one knows you don't know anything, okay? One of the things I found very interesting is the Council of 50 is because they are talking about this council and how a council should function. It actually gives us a little bit of insight into at least what Joseph Smith believed of the proper function of a council. How should a council function? In Mormonism, today, you might be aware that councils still exist. So maybe this is some good insight that we might be interested in. As I'm quoting from this, some of this will be in first person and some will be in third person because William Clayton will at times be writing in first person for the person speaking and then switching into third person. So I'm not schizophrenic as I seem, okay? Joseph first declared of the council that he wanted everyone in the council to speak their mind, exactly what they thought of any subject. And if they didn't, he would consider them to be no better than doughheads. Okay. I love Joseph. And it's so rare that we get a little bit of it's so rare that we get his personality through some of his writings because he wasn't the one who was actually writing. He had scribes write for him. But in these meeting notes that were very faithful by William Clayton, we get Joseph Smith expressing himself in this way. I love how he like would use terms like they must lump off or something. I love that so much. But anyway, he also, I don't know if you guys knew this, you guys, let me know if you knew this in the chat, but he also identified himself with Moses because he had a stutter. Okay. He called himself a stuttering fellow, much like Moses in one of his discourses. And that's actually really important because when we consider Joseph's identity in the prophetic in the prophetic records that are left behind, then it's interesting to know what Joseph considered himself to be. In any case, we continue. It says, for Joseph, he believes that the whole point of having a council is that people are actually going to speak their mind and say what it is that they think. If you're not going to speak your mind, there's no point in having a council in the first place. The whole point is to be able to speak your mind. He will later go on to say that once the council has made its decision, that you should respect it. If you have a problem with the idea that is being discussed, you need to talk about it before they finally make the decision. One of the quotes that he is going to leave us with is, quote, the reason why men always failed to establish important measures was because in their organization, they never could agree to disagree long enough to select the pure gold from the dross by the process of investigation. Okay. That's actually a really brilliant quote. I love that quote. I'm going to highlight that. Interesting. Joseph understood that in this council, in this committee that he was meeting with, that there should be a tendency to want to find out whatever Joseph thought and then hurry to agree with him. Some of you may have been at some point involved in a meeting or a council where that's the case. Yes, absolutely. Where people just want to know what, the bishop is thinking or what they want to do. Joseph is saying that actually undermines the whole point of getting people together. The point of getting people together is so that all the viewpoints can be shared so that you can determine what is best course of action. There is this quote about what you should do after you consent to something. I don't want any man to ever to assent to anything in this council and then find fault with it. Don't decide in favor of anything until you know it. Okay, one of the courses of action questions that they continually had was that they were supposed to be creating a new constitution. Okay, so this dives right into the heart of what we're going to be talking about today with this Council of 50. And the idea that President Oaks may be called upon to rewrite a constitution and, create basically a more perfect and restored government in which the second coming can occur and Jesus Christ can reign as King of Kings. While still maintaining the Constitution too, by the way, because remember, it's been prophesied as well that the elders of this church will maintain the Constitution or preserve the Constitution in some way, right? It doesn't necessarily say that the United States itself will be preserved, but it is prophesied that the Constitution will be preserved, okay? So, with that in mind, we continue. Their plan in creating this new constitution was to leave the United States and to go somewhere else where they could actually establish the kingdom of God and they could practice their religion without any threat of interference. To do this, they wanted to write a constitution. As you can imagine, this is a pretty heavy task for this committee. If you are assigned to the Constitution for the Kingdom of God on Earth committee, that's kind of a huge deal, right? It is a little bit more than the Redeem the Dead committee, right? The people assigned to this feel great trepidation. They feel almost as if no matter what we do, we are going to be kind of wrong because there's no way we are just going to come up with this. So they actually ask Joseph, why don't you just tell us what the Constitution should be and we will write it down and that's what we'll end up with. Okay, so this is important, you guys. This is really, really important because this demonstrates several things. Okay, first of all, we're going to learn the real process of revelation, as described in Doctrine and Covenants, by the way. But not only that, but these people had such faith that Joseph Smith was a true prophet of God, that they knew that Joseph, obviously he's an intelligent person. We just read this very fascinating quote up here. But they had such faith in him as a prophet that they believed that he could receive revelation, and indeed he could receive revelation, as to exactly what this Constitution for the entire kingdom of God on earth, what that should look like. Okay? So that's the extent of their faith that they had in Joseph Smith as a prophet of God. Okay? So I think that is a great testimony in and of itself that we find here in this historical record that we're reading here. Can you imagine that would be such a task? I can only imagine the great stress that the founding fathers of this country faced as they were trying to study out in their minds and create a constitution. They were inspired as well, but they had to come up with this document on their own, and they had to study it out in their minds. They had to figure it out, and they did such a prophetic job. Not being members of the church and not having the gift of the Holy Spirit with them. But nevertheless, they were inspired to do this by God because it was necessary to bring about the restoration of the gospel, as we know. But the fact of the matter is that they felt really daunted. Can you imagine coming up with a constitution for the kingdom of God on earth? Okay, and if that's the case, will we have to do this at some point as a church, as an organization, create a constitution or reform the constitution in such a way for the kingdom of God? Very fascinating idea, right? Okay, let's continue here. Joseph Smith explained why he wants them to put forth all of their efforts to come up with the best constitution they can come up with first. He said that the committee was first appointed to bring forth all of the intelligence that they could, and then their productions were to be presented to him, and then he would correct the errors and fill in the interests where it was lacking. Okay? Quote, "It is necessary for the council to exhaust their wisdom, and except they do this, they will never know but that they are wise as God himself. And ambitious men will, like Lucifer, think they are as wise as God, and will try to lift themselves up and put their foot on the necks of others." So they're saying, Joseph Smith is saying, you guys are good guys. You're not like Lucifer and his followers. You should be more ambitious. You should be more forward thinking. You can do real good. And I've tried to also do this on this channel. You guys, you have such influence and power that you guys don't even know about in this channel. You guys, we have powers that God has granted us to affect the way that prophecy is fulfilled. And I kind of talked about this on today's episode. But the actions that we take have eternal consequences. In any case, we continue. There has always been some man to put himself forward and say, I am great, etc. I want this council to exert all of their wisdom in this thing. And when they see that they cannot get a perfect law themselves, and I can, then they will see from whence wisdom flows. Okay? So he's saying, you can do a lot of good, but in the end, we're going to get a revelation from God to fix this. Okay? Ultimately, everything rests in God's hands, you guys. He's not saying this to aggrandize himself. He's saying that wisdom flows from God. Okay? The very interesting teaching that Joseph demonstrates here is that in order for them to fully be able to accept the revelation when it comes, they need to actually put forth all of their own efforts. That's an interesting point too. So otherwise, Joseph might present it to them and they will say, well, if I was doing this, I would have come up with this. Okay? Well, you did try and you didn't come up with it. You already know what you could or could not come up with. Okay, that's an interesting point. So the council will labor on trying to create the Constitution. Eventually, Joseph will give them what the Constitution is, and it is a revelation from God, and it is only 2 lines. They did expend a great deal of energy without maybe that they might have viewed as not being essential energy, but they do receive it by revelation from Joseph eventually. Okay, interesting. I'm very interested to see what this Constitution comprises of. In the conversation about these things, you hear other people weigh in as well. For instance, we get conversations from Brigham Young. The Council of 50 Minutes demonstrates, as well as everything else in Brigham Young's life, his absolute and complete devotion to Joseph Smith. His devotion to Joseph Smith is on display before Joseph dies. It is on display after Joseph Smith dies. In fact, during one of the conversations after Joseph has been murdered, Almon Babbitt, if you know church history, you know that Almon Babbitt is a colorful person in church history, will make some comment that Brigham Young perceives as criticizing Joseph Smith. Brigham Young interrupts the meeting and says, "All right, I have made up my mind that I will never listen to someone speaking against Joseph in my presence." Okay? When they are talking about this concept of allowing revelation to dictate how their new kingdom might be formed, Brigham Young weighed in on some pretty interesting teachings that I think are pretty profound. Brigham said that he felt as exalted as he could. He contemplated kings and governments as they are, and they sunk into oblivion when he compared them with this kingdom, which was only now an embryo, and it would soon send forth its influence throughout the nations. There would no doubt be a regular organization. He had heard much said on the subject of bringing forth the Constitution, but he considered himself to be highly honored to have this privilege of being accounted a fool, that when we had done all that we were capable to do, he could have the Lord speak and tell us what is right. Okay, that is an interesting perspective for sure. A very humble perspective that we don't really get often from Brigham Young, or we don't see that side of him. He said, quote, "There's a great deal already written, and we conform to ourselves independent of the world, of the word of the Lord, the best system of government on earth. But after all this, when we have done all, the Lord will make just right. He can form a constitution by which he is willing to be governed. He is willing to be ruled by the means which God would appoint." Okay, very interesting. Brigham said, "We don't believe that we can adopt laws for the government of the people in futurity. We can, for the time being, point out laws for the present necessities." Okay, he supposed, "There has not yet been a perfect revelation given because we cannot understand it." Okay. Oh, that's very interesting. That is an interesting philosophical point that he's making here. The idea that language is insufficient, really, if we don't understand something perfectly, then we can't really, it can't be a perfect revelation because we can't receive it. Okay, that is a commentary on the ability that language has in order to communicate ideas one to another. And the ideas that God can communicate with us are limited because we have limited capacity to understand it. Okay, we continue. "Yet we receive a little here and a little there. He should not be stumbled if the prophet should translate the Bible 40,000 times over, and yet it should be different in some places every time, because when God speaks, he always speaks according to the capacity of the people." Okay? The capacity of the people to understand dictates how the revelation is given. Okay? Very important. That is a pretty profound statement that Brigham is going to make there. He is actually going to reiterate this in several sermons he will give in Utah. The nature of revelation is such that God speaks to people as they have the ability to understand it. It is a part of the reason why people shouldn't fret too much over a revelation that says one thing and then a revelation later that says something a little bit different or a little bit more, because God speaks to people according to their capacity. The starting point of the government of the kingdom is the book of Doctrine and Covenants, but he does not know how much more there is in the bosom of the Almighty. When God sees that his people are enlarged upon what he has given us, he will give us more. Very interesting. The starting point is here, but God has not come here. He has sent his agent, his minister, to act in his name. And if he has got an agent to dictate to us here, the organization is here. When a man is clothed with authority to do all in the business for those who sent him, what he does is right. And this is the kind of agent we have got, and God appointed him, speaking of Joseph. We did not appoint him. If the Lord Almighty calls upon one of his servants as a minister, the nation to whom he is sent has no control over him whatsoever. If the Latter-day Saints believe that our prophet is fallen, what are they going to do? How will they help themselves? It is the prerogative of the Almighty to differ from his subjects in what he pleases, or how and when he pleases. And what will they do? They must bow to it or kick themselves to death or to hell. He, Joseph Smith, can disagree with the whole church as he has a mind to, and how? Because he is a perfect committee of himself. He would rather have a pure revelation of Jesus Christ as they now stand to carry the nations than anything else. Interesting. That's a very interesting quote. It's kind of a long-winded way of saying that Joseph Smith follows Jesus Christ. Interesting. You get this statement from Brigham Young as they're preparing. John Taylor is also going to weigh in. I'm going to find an image of John Taylor without the neckbeard. You can think of him at some point being young. And Taylor is going to also reiterate this, that revelation has to come through the prophet for this. It says, quote, if they can get intelligence from God, they can arrive at correct principles. If not, they cannot. He was always convinced that no power can guide us right but the wisdom of God. It needed revelation from God to show the first principles of the kingdom of God. No one knew how to baptize or lay on hands until it was revealed through our chairman, Joseph Smith. National affairs are equally as fallen and degenerate as religious matters. This nation is as far fallen and degenerate as any nation under heaven. When we were in the world, we were ignorant with regard to correct principles. We are now a little differently situated. We have a portion of the Spirit, but if we get the document anywhere right, it will be because God gives it. And if not, we know nothing but what either you, Joseph Smith, or God teaches us. You get again this idea of devotion. After Joseph Smith is murdered, the council is going to pause in their meetings for quite some time. This is a very difficult blow to all of them. But when they meet again, they're going to still try to continue to carry out Joseph Smith's wishes. And Brigham Young will just adamantly believe that everything he is doing is exactly what Joseph wanted to do, and what Joseph would have done had Joseph been there. They'll actually have conversations like that in the council where the argument they'll make for a position they take is, this is what Joseph wanted. So they very much feel like they're trying to make up the mantle or take up the mantle that Joseph has given them. At the same time, Joseph's murder really makes them feel, or many of them feel, quite embittered towards certainly the way the country has acted toward them. One example of this is found with probably one of the most famous people in Mormon history. In fact, has to be the most famous person in Mormon history who wrote absolutely nothing in his life. Porter Rockwell is totally illiterate. He doesn't have the ability to even sign his own name. In fact, any Porter Rockwell document we have is an X with someone after signing Porter Rockwell, explaining who it was. So we actually, for all the biographies that are written about Rockwell, and every fireside you've ever been to, none of that actually comes from Rockwell himself because he wrote nothing. So you actually have very little that comes from him, and it isn't a reminiscence of someone saying, "Oh, I remember crazy Porter Rockwell when he did this," right? Here is this council meeting because Rockwell speaks, and William Clayton jots it down as he's speaking. You get a little bit of an insight into the character of Porter Rockwell, and you're not surprised what Rockwell has to say. As they're discussing the fact that even though Joseph has been murdered, mob violence is still rising up in and around Nauvoo. This did not end anti-Mormon sentiment in the area, and things are steadily declining, not getting better, for their position in Nauvoo. And as they're discussing this, Rockwell says this, quote, "I say yes to everything that is good and right. I was a friend of Joseph while he lived, and I am still his friend. He can't avenge his wrongs himself, but I mean to avenge them for him. And if I get into trouble, I want you to help me if you can." And this is how it's actually written in the minutes. Without criminating yourselves. Oh, okay. So he's trying to say without incriminating yourselves, which is probably exactly how he said it. And then probably in the best insight into his character that you could find, he said, "I love my friends and I hate my enemies. I can't love them if I would." Okay. Very interesting. That's one of the rare instances where we have something written in Porter Rockwell's voice. Okay, very, very fascinating. So maybe our view of Porter Rockwell isn't as much of a caricature as it might seem. It certainly seems to fit the mold. As I said, there's a great deal of anxiety and sadness and loss amongst these people that you felt pretty palpably as you go through the minutes. They feel a loss, and not just as Joseph was a friend and a leader, but a loss of faith, really, in the institutions of the government, which they already had been going down pretty quickly. But here their prophet and his brother had been murdered. And you have John Taylor again comment on this, and you can feel this bitterness at the loss of Joseph Smith as he talks about it. Okay, let's just pause right here just for a moment. I want to go through and read some of the chat here. You guys have been patient. Oh yeah, okay, let's go up here. Wow, we have a lot of people here. Okay, so I'm just gonna call you DD Bronsnahan. I don't really know how to pronounce that. It says, will the Constitution be destroyed? No, it will be held inviolate by this people. And as Joseph Smith said, the time will come when the destiny of the nation will hang upon a single thread. Brigham Young. Absolutely. Great quote. Thank you for quoting that. At that critical juncture, this people will step forth to save it from the threatened destruction. It will be so. Very, very fascinating quote, isn't it? House of Israel says Doctrine and Covenants 134 explained about what is expected from governments. Yes, very much so. Scottish Warrior says Joseph Smith said the hanging of a thread many times, not just this time. Yeah, there's lots of different people who said that he used that quote. So yeah, that's a very good thing to bring up, I think. So at least we know that that portion is correct. I know that a lot of times people will bring up the white horse prophecy, and that is, that prophecy, quote unquote, is probably not accurate, but we do know that the part where it says hanging by a thread, that part is accurate because Joseph Smith did use that several times. The other parts in that prophecy probably are very, very questionable. But anything that comes from a direct source like Brigham Young, that's a very good and reliable source. We continue. House of Israel says, AI says the original source for the Council of 50 are the 3 bound volumes of minutes which were recorded by the clerk, William Clayton. Yes, absolutely. That's what we're kind of going through today and getting the most interesting portions of these minutes. Oh, we have somebody who sent in a super chat, you guys. Awesome. Okay, let's read that right now. All right. Thank you so much for sending that. Is very generous of you. I appreciate that so much, and your contribution will help the channel to keep growing. It is from Dallasar, KM1WS. Okay. And they write, I find it, it's from Canadian dollars. Oh, that's awesome. I didn't know it could do that. Okay, it says, I find it interesting that there has not been a judge in Israel since the days of Samuel. Think about the changes that were happening amongst the Israelites at his time, a complete change in government preceding the coming of the king. Okay, that's a very interesting thought. I don't know if we've not had a judge in Israel since since the days of Samuel. Okay, and the reason why I say that is because the prophets are all judges in Israel. Okay, Moses was considered a judge in Israel. All the prophets are considered a judge of Israel. And so Dallin H. Oaks would be considered a judge in Israel. And he literally is a judge as well. So it's so fascinating to consider what role that President Dallin H. Oaks has been prepared by the Lord to fulfill in these latter days when we're preparing for the second coming of Jesus Christ. This is a fantastic comment. Thank you so much for sending me that super chat. We can speculate a lot on the different things. I think that, it's such a fascinating idea to think maybe President Oaks has been set in place to help protect the Constitution, specifically for religious freedom and specifically to prepare the world for the second coming of Jesus Christ. And he's actually kind of made suggestions to that effect as well, saying things like, it's important that everyone around the world know the Constitution of the United States, regardless of where you live, all around the world, and implement the principles that are found therein, including religious freedom, so that people can join the church. People can have the religious freedom to believe what they want to believe and join the church if they want to, right? That's one of the most important things. And unfortunately, that's kind of something that's been under attack recently, even in places that are more, supposed to be quite liberal in the way that they think, but liberal doesn't, I mean liberal in the sense that they're supposed to allow people the religious freedom and the freedom of speech. but that's kind of gotten cast by the wayside in places like Great Britain, for example, where people are being arrested for praying silently in front of abortion clinics. So in that case, both the freedom of religion is being violated and the freedom of speech. So yeah, it's very interesting that these things are still under attack, even in places in the West. So I think that President Oaks will play a very important role as prophet in these latter days. And as President Eyring also pointed out, when he was ordained as prophet, they saw that mantle rest upon him, and they saw him as a new person. And I think that that is remarkable. They saw him as knowing what to do and having that conviction of moving forward with the work of the Lord. And so I think that their testimony is really exciting, and helps to strengthen our testimony as well. What it would have been like to be in that room as he was ordained, I would really like to know more about that. But again, thank you so much for sending in that super chat. That is very generous of you to do. All goes to support the channel and to help support our volunteers and everything. So thank you so much. Feel free, everybody in the chat, send me in super chats if you'd like, and we will continue trying to read through your comments here. So Lindsay says, I can't wait to meet Joseph Smith. He seems to be one of a kind. Yes, he is very one of a kind. He's kind of feisty, you know, and I think that that is a little bit important. He said, you don't want to be a doughhead. I love that. And he said, lump off, people. Lump off. It's like Lumpy Space Princess. I love that so much. I don't know. I don't know if that was like a saying that was commonly said, or if he, like, I don't know. It's just like, so, I don't know if you guys have seen Adventure Time. It's a cartoon. But there's a character called Lumpy Space Princess in it, and she's constantly saying lump off. And it's very much like Joseph Smith, and he said lump it, or like they must lump it, or something to that effect. And it was like, it's so proper the way he said it. But it's so funny. I would like to know more about that phrase and learn more if that was something that he typically said, because I think that's the only record that we have him of saying that. Anyway, let's continue reading. House of Israel says the Constitution hanging by a thread is contained in the book Prophecy by Dwayne S. Crowther. Well, yes, and that quote from Brigham Young is found in the Journal of Discourses. It's recorded there as well, and you can find that if you search for it online. If you want to read the date of that, it was on July 4th of 18. Oh, I can't remember the date. But yes, it was said. That is recorded in official church history. So, the Haystack. Hi, Haystack. How are you? We gave you a little shout out. Haystack has joined us. Welcome, welcome. Says, sorry, was at the church ball. Melissa is catching me up. Awesome. Yes, we're talking about some of the things that you were discussing today. With regards to the fact that we're specifically examining the Council of 50. So, yeah, this is really interesting to view it in this light. Is President Oaks someone who is called to kind of rewrite the Constitution in ways to get us ready for the second coming, or, you know, to help preserve it in that way? To restore it maybe would be a better word, I thought. To help restore the Constitution to a more perfect revelation. And we've been reading, this is really fascinating because we're reading how all of these people, the Council of 50, were called together and they were tasked with forming a constitution for the kingdom of God, and how overwhelmed they felt. You know, and we already have a constitution of this government. But ultimately, Joseph Smith said, we will find out where the source of all wisdom flows from, because you'll present me with this, you'll exert all of your efforts, you'll do all these things to come up with a revelation for yourself, but then God will correct it, and you'll see that he is wise and able to govern the people, basically, is what he said. And so it's really interesting to me, what if President Oaks took this and with revelation was able to come up with the kingdom of God's perfect and restored Constitution. And I think that that's just a fascinating concept. But yeah, we're kind of like, I'm trying to like pull it all together for Haystack here in the chat. We continue from House of Israel. They write Joseph Smith Papers, Administrative Records, Council of 50 Minutes, March 1844 to January 1846. Perfect. That's a great reference. Dee says, will the Constitution be destroyed? No, it will be held inviolate by this people. As Joseph Smith said, the time will come when the destiny of this nation will hang upon a single thread. Absolutely. Constitution is not the problem. We just don't follow it. Well, I mean, the Constitution, I would agree with you that it's not the problem, but I think that it can be improved and perfected. I think that any document that is created by mankind ultimately is flawed, whether that be the Bible, the Book of Mormon, and again, the ability for the people to understand it, to understand language even, limits our ability to have a perfect revelation. Okay, even though God is perfect, because we're imperfect beings, it's impossible for us to have a perfect revelation. Okay, so Bert Pitts 3375 says, was the debate over the Constitution a form of a Council of 50? Oh, you mean the original Constitution of the United States? Possibly, like like the delegation that was formed in order to, maybe, I mean, like a type of it. Maybe that's a good idea. Like we always say that the Constitution of this nation is inspired by God. So maybe it was even the way that they debated over it and the way that they formed the Constitution was probably inspired as well. So that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Thanks for that comment. Catch the Buzz says, congratulations, over 52,000 subscribers. Great job, everyone. Thank you guys so much for joining us and for following the channel. This is such a fantastic thing to see all of you here in the chat as well. I appreciate all of your input. And thank you so much for your support. It means a lot to me to see the success of this channel and to see your dedication to just being a part of this community. I love that so much about this. So yeah, thank you so much. Lindsay says, this topic is fascinating. Yes, I agree. I think it is fascinating as well. House of Israel says, First Nephi chapter 22, verses 13 and 14. Okay. If you want to quote that, I would appreciate it because I don't have the thing open right now where I can actually read it for you. But yeah, feel free to quote that. Goblin says, hello from St. George, Utah. Welcome, Goblin. Lindsay Black says, I love our Constitution. I can't wait to see what can be added upon it. Interesting. Yes, it's very interesting to think about. Okay, let's... I just skipped down. Okay, hold on. Church history, okay. Okay, congratulations. We read that part. Oh, I just disconnected you guys. My video feed, where'd it go? Oh, where's my video feed? Oh, it's because the AI turned on. That's why. Why would it do that? I have to go on Do Not Disturb, and then we'll turn the camera back on for you guys so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, there we go. All right. Oh, and of course it turned ugly again because it's not in 4K now. But that's okay. We'll just appear gray. It turned off again. Okay, there we're back. All right. We'll just have to appear gray and ugly right now. It's like in 720 resolution. So we have no colors. For some reason, the the 4K is so much more saturated than 720 resolution. So yeah. All right, let's continue here. From page 68 of Prophecy, it states that the Constitution will not be destroyed, but held inviolate by this people. Perfect. Yeah. Joseph Smith History, Book 7, page 382, and the Journal of Discourses, Book 7, page 15. Very good references. I love that. House of Israel, thank you for sending that. I am still not Lizzie. Okay. Looks like the message was deleted by Catch the Buzz. Thank you for that. Seems like they are being disruptive. William says, hi, Seth. Hello. Welcome, everybody, to the chat. Catch the Buzz says, hey, David, Willing, Joseph Smith Leahona. Okay. Wow. Thank you very much for your support of this channel. Yes, that was so generous. Thank you so much for your super chat. Dallasar, I think that is your name. Dallasar KM1WS. House of Israel retracted a message. Santiago Realty says, very interesting. I have never considered that. It's awesome. Yeah. Nothing is a coincidence. The Lord has raised up a prophet who is a judge in every sense to be who we need at this exact moment in time. I'm going to say a doughhead from now on. Yes, I love that so much. Doughhead. Don't be a doughhead. Seek your own revelation first and then bring it to the Lord, right? Don't be a doughhead. We should make t-shirts with that. Oh, you guys, by the way, that reminds me, the t-shirts are in production and the t-shirts are going to be done so I can show it to you very soon. I'm very excited to show you all of our colors so you can see the purple and you can see the blue. So make sure that you check out our website, risezion.org, so that you can pre-order your shirts now. I know that some of you have been waiting for so long and we need to get those out to you. So, but yeah, just you can pre-order right now. You don't have to wait. You can pre-order it and then you can have it set and ready to go. And we ordered enough for everybody. So the next project that we're probably going to be working on is hats. And I want to get the leather patch kind. So that will be fun. All right. Santiago Realty says it was an old saying. You can like it or lump it. My mom and dad used to say to use it on us all the time. Oh, okay. So that's really interesting. Is that like a thing that they say back east, like on the Eastern Coast? Because that's something I've never heard before, like ever, except for on Adventure Time, a cartoon. But it's so funny to me. I love it. Lump off. Lump it. I love it. Okay, so Zach Strong says, until the Lord reveals his new constitution, however, we must honor his current word, which states that anything more or less than the Constitution cometh of evil. See Doctrine and Covenants section 98, verses 5 through 7. Does it actually say that and use those exact words? I don't recall that, but I love that as well. That's true if that's the case. I recommend everyone read W. Cleon Skousen's book, The Majesty of God's Law. It will clear up a lot about what's coming in terms of law for the millennium. Ooh, very interesting. Santiago Realty says, it's not the document, it's the leaders. Yeah, that's true. I mean, like, again, it gets into that idea that we're all imperfect human beings and we don't have the capacity to really understand, the full implications of a revelation. So, I mean, that's true. That's very true, Santiago Realty. House of Israel says, that can be read on your own. Okay, good. Goblin Camper says, do you think the digital IDs are the starting signs of the mark of the beast? Well, I kind of think that the mark of the beast, oh, that's a good question. Mark of the beast, digital IDs. I don't know. It's just like in every time period, there's been somebody thinking about the mark of the beast in the context of like credit cards, for example. When credit cards were a new thing, people were like, oh, it's the mark of the beast. It's the digital ID. I mean, it could be. I think that the mark of the beast might be anything or any identity that you take upon yourself that would inhibit you from worshiping God. So I think that that's kind of the reason why President Nelson was so focused on our true identity as sons and daughters of God. Having the mark of God on your forehead, for example, being sealed his, is the opposite of the mark of the beast, right? So being part of the covenant, the mark of the beast, and I know what you're referring to. A lot of people marry the idea with currency, and I think that it does kind of have to do with that as well, like the idea that no one will be able to sell or buy without the mark of the beast. Well, I mean, we all do to some extent. We participate in Babylon, if we are a part of this world. But I think it's an important saying, to be of this world, but not, how does the saying go? To live in the world, but not be a part of it. Step out of Babylon, in other words. Come out of her is the verse in Revelation. Willing Leohonis, or Willings JS Leohonis says, hello from St. George, Utah. Welcome. Dallison KM1WS says, yes, the prophets are, the idea is his secular. Oh, I see. You're responding to what I just said. The idea is of his secular position, even though he is a judge in Israel in the church context, like Samuel, he was a secular judge. Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. Okay, very good. While at the same time being a prophet. Gotcha. I understand. Jimmy Henry says, as a member who struggles to stay active, I appreciate your videos and live streams very much. They often give me a little spiritual boost when I need it. Thanks, Seth. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that a lot. And that's great to hear that we're making a difference here on the channel. I love to hear that. So thank you for sharing. Dallin says, even though President Oaks has been retired from being a judge for some time, I feel the similarity between the two is interesting. Yes, very much so. Very interesting indeed. I think that there's definitely a reason for that. I mean, he still is an avid studier of the Constitution. Like he's very much on top of it. You know what I mean? House of Israel says, they were told that the Council of 50 was not a church organization, but was composed of members irrespective of their religious faith. Yeah, so hypothetically, the Council of 50 would be composed of people outside of our religion as well. So that's something that's very interesting. I hope they actually get into this in this article. I don't know if they actually do, though, but we're going to continue reading it in just a moment. House of Israel says, did we just read that? Opposition. Oh, let's see. I just got skipped down again. Oh my goodness. Yes, that would be a... I just skipped down and I just jumped like past a whole bunch of comments here. Hold on just a second. Okay, I think I read that already. Nathaniel Wilkerson is saying, will this be the new MAGA? No, it will be the kingdom of God on earth. Lindsay Black says, that would be great. A great t-shirt. Don't be a doughhead. I love that. And then we could put like a little, I don't know, like Joseph Smith with like a little crown on his head or something. I don't know. Because like one of the things that the anti-Mormons were saying at the time was that Joseph Smith was trying to set himself up as a king. So it would be interesting if we did that. It would be kind of like a little nod to the historical record here. Don't be a doughhead, you guys. Don't be a doughhead. Willing J.S. Leohona said, Joseph also told many he'd give them a key that will not rust. Stick with the majority of the apostles and the saints and church records, and you will never go to apostasy. Yeah, that's true. Santiago Realty says, I'm old. My parents were born in the early 1900s. Oh, okay, so it's just an old saying. Yeah, well, you have to let us know some more context, Santiago's Realty. Was it like, were your parents from the New England area, or are they like from Utah? So maybe they actually got it from Joseph Smith themselves, if they're like from Utah this whole time, and maybe it just got passed down from Joseph Smith actually. So this is kind of an interesting thing to think about. Catch the Buzz says, gray and ugly. Opposition, this is going to be a great live stream. I don't know what you're referring to, Catch the Buzz. What are you talking about? Let me know what you're saying. Gray and ugly. Opposition, this is going to be a great live stream. Interesting. I don't know what you're talking about. Okay, Ronk says, you are too young to know, like it, lump it, or like it or lump it, saying, okay, well, I don't know where it came from, though. I still want to know, because nobody uses that today, you guys. So if you know where it comes from, let me know. Is it from the East Coast? Is it just a Utah thing? What's going on here? House of Israel says, organized for the purpose of consulting on the best manner of obtaining redress of grievances from our enemies. Yes, absolutely. So yeah, that's an important thing too. So part of the reason, as we kind of just read about the disenfranchisement that the early saints were feeling, Joseph Smith kind of felt inspired to create this when he was running for president, so that they could, better find redress from what they felt was a huge gaping hole in the Constitution, which was that they didn't have religious protection at a state and local level. But hey, at least the federal government wasn't coming after them for their religion. So, we're looking at the Constitution as a perfect document. No, it was not a perfect document. The Constitution did not provide religious protections at a state and local level at this time. So that came later and was had to be added through a process of amendment. The original Constitution writers viewed it as a possibility that they would miss things, and so they made it possible to amend the Constitution and change it to make it better. Okay, there's a legal process to go through in which President Oaks could perhaps lobby to have the Constitution be changed. I mean, the church has quite a lot of resources at its disposal. Perhaps it's possible that a change might be necessary to the Constitution. I don't know. It's kind of interesting that President Oaks could make a change to the Constitution in the correct and prescribed way by the Constitution. There's a prescribed way to go about doing it. So, yeah. Zach Strong says, yes, it does literally say that. Ergo, it's part of our religion to strictly obey the Constitution. Politically, anything else is evil. Why does no one ever read the scriptures the Lord has revealed? Realty or reality. I can't read that. My eyes are okay. Oh, it's not realty. It's just reality. Are you just saying reality? Yeah, that's right. Awesome. Lindsay Black says, hi, catch the buzz. House of Israel says, mark of the beast. Think about the okay. As in real. Okay, reality. I'm sorry, my eyes don't work very good, Santiago's. But I'm still very curious about the origin of the lumpet phrase. So let me know. Zach Strong says, befriend that law, which is the constitutional law of the land, and as pertaining to the law of man, whatsoever is more or less than this cometh of evil. Interesting. Nathaniel Wilkerson says, are we talking about a theocracy only in Utah or nationwide? Well, we're talking about worldwide theocracy. It would not be a theocracy necessarily, but perhaps a theodemocracy. A theodemocracy, a democracy that has theocratic, well, it has the King of Kings at its head, so Jesus Christ is God, reigning on earth personally. So he would be the top of this democracy, but there would be democratic qualities to it. And I hope that we get into this in this paper coming up. Okay. Okay, so Santiago Reality says, from Utah, my great-grandparents came across the plains, both sides of my family. Okay, so they did come from the East Coast, probably. Unless they are from, like, Britain. Maybe they're from, like, Great Britain. Because had a lot of saints come over from Great Britain. Otherwise, I would say they probably are from the East Coast originally. Interesting. This is very interesting to consider where the word lump off came from, or where the phrase lump it, like it or lump it came from. During the Nauvoo period, 3 were believed to be non-members. Awesome. I love that. Let's see. Zach Strong says, like it or lump it is a normal phrase. Well, I don't think it's a normal phrase. I've never heard it, Zach Strong. So it must not be normal if I haven't heard it. Um, but yeah, that's very interesting. I really love the phrase. I think it's very funny and I love it. But I just love Joseph Smith saying it. I want to clarify that the Constitution absolutely did protect people's rights. What was insufficient was the understanding of the people of the time as to this proper application. Well, yeah, I mean, they had to amend the Constitution, though, to specify that that the state and local governments' constitutions didn't override that of the federal government. So that was something that specifically had to be changed. Otherwise, that we would still be having slavery today. So, well, and the people would be treated unfairly. During the civil rights movement, they had to change a lot there. Anyway, the House of Israel 77 says to clarify the phylactery. Okay. Was an outward symbol of who the Jewish people worshipped, which is why they wore it on their forehead. So, okay, I see what you're saying. So whoever is in the forefront of our minds, the world or Christ. Yeah, I think that is accurate, House of Israel 77. That's kind of what I'm thinking, is how we view things. Do we view things through the perspective of money, or do we view them through the kingdom of God and our covenants first? Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking, but I'll have to do some more studying on that because it's a really interesting and complex issue. The phylactery was a reminder to them of God's laws. Yes, very interesting. So Catch the Bus says, Seth, you said that your video is now gray and ugly because your camera... Oh, I see. Okay, I see what you're saying. The video is now gray and ugly because your camera shut off and now has sad colors, therefore opposition in all things. So this will be a great live stream. Yes, that's very true. Okay, I see what you're saying now. Okay. I wasn't sure what you're referring to. I thought somebody said something in the comments. Okay, so Wheeling says, President Kimball said about Mark of the Beast, the mark is not a physical brand, but the thoughts and actions that show where a person's heart is aligned. Very good insight. I love that. Okay. Oh, Wheeling Leahona is David. Okay, welcome, David. I know David. We've spoken before. Welcome to the chat. House of Israel says exactly to Wheeling. Santiago Reality says he could be working on it right now. It's important to be prepared. Prophets are always ahead of things. That's true. All right, we made it to the last of the chat. Okay, again, you guys, we're going to continue reading this. But yeah, send in your super chats if you'd like to, and we will continue reading it here. Oh, we have one more message from Marilee, who says, "Like it or lump it" was a common phrase by the teenagers in the 1960s. I'm from Southern Colorado, and it was used here. Thank you, Seth. Awesome. Okay. Okay, interesting. So in Colorado, it was a thing. I'm seeing a common thread, though. It seems to be in communities of Latter-day Saints. You know what I'm saying? It seems to maybe Joseph Smith actually coined that saying, or he got it from somewhere in the East. Words come from someplace, right? All right, let's continue. Okay, so yes, this is John Taylor, who's going to be commenting on his bitterness, or he has a lot of bitterness about the loss of Joseph Smith, and this is going to come through in his message here. He says, quote, "In regard to the situation of the world as it now exists, I don't care a damn because they're as corrupt as the devil. We have no benefit from the laws of this land, and the only reason why they don't cut our throats is because they dare not. As Brother Heber C. Kimball says, I don't care how often the bucket is turned up. Some cry out, it will bring persecution." Okay, so that's John Taylor, the prophet, who is cussing. He's saying the D word. Okay, so yeah, but this is some serious language, you guys. He is really, you can feel the weight and the heaviness behind his words. This was a constitution that failed them. This was a government that had failed them. But yeah, we continue. So he's responding to the fact that some people feel like if they take a more hardened stance against the persecution they're facing, that it will cause people to persecute them. And John Taylor thinks that's a pretty specious argument, given that it's already happened. He says, I don't care, but they cannot lie about us or persecute us any worse than they've done. I go in for worshiping the scoundrel, or to whipping the scoundrels, sorry. I go in for whipping the scoundrels when they come in our midst. And then if any of them come near me, I will use my cane on them, and I want my brethren to do likewise. Okay. He goes on to speak specifically about some local constables that he believes are violating their oath of office. But he says that, quote, we know we have no more justice here, no more than we could get at the gates of hell. And the only thing that we have got to do is take care of ourselves. As to the other thing which has been proposed about seeking out a location in the West, I don't care how soon it goes into operation. People talk about law and justice. I go in for giving them the same kind of justice they give us. I go in for company being sent out to find a place where we can establish the kingdom and erect the standard and dwell in peace and have our own laws. John Taylor. So you kind of get from this statement here of John Taylor, you get a bit of this. You'll certainly see this in Taylor's publication in the Times and Seasons as well, that there's a real sense of loss and bitterness. They feel like they're being driven out of the nation. In fact, if I go back here to the places where they're considering as locations to move, you can see all of the places they're considering. They're deliberately considering them because they're not in the United States. Okay, the plan is to get out of the United States. We've tried the United States in New York. That didn't work. We tried Ohio. That didn't work. We tried Missouri. Didn't work. And here we are in Illinois, and it's not working. And so the idea is that if we can get outside of the United States, then maybe we can finally live our religion in peace. For a long time, they're actually really considering going to Texas. They send representatives there. They discuss it. They talk about it for quite some time. And in the end, the reason why they drop Texas as a possibility isn't because they've never been there in the summer. It's because I apologize if you're from Texas, but not really, because you've been there too. The main reason why they decide to drop Texas as a possible place is they're actually in the midst of a meeting discussing a possible removal to Texas when a messenger comes to the meeting and says Texas has just been annexed by the United States. And they immediately drop it as an option. Okay, so they're trying to get away. The whole point is to get out of the United States. You go to Texas, you're still under the same jurisdiction of the same laws, of the same judges, of the same president who will do nothing to help us in the persecution we face. And so the Upper California, the portion of Mexico that is currently occupied by Native Americans, but essentially unoccupied by white people, is what then becomes the focus of their plans. There's obviously lots of things I could share, but I want to have a few minutes for questions despite my attempts to go over. And so that last thing I want to share is probably the most beautiful aspect, the most beautiful teaching that I found going through the minutes, and that is Joseph Smith, while still alive, is going to give a pretty lengthy discourse on the ideas of tolerance and religious freedom and in opposition to religious bigotry. As they're talking about forming this new council, Joseph deliberately wants non-Mormons to be a part of it. He wants it to be inclusive because he wants this to be a kingdom that's inclusive of many people. He believes he's setting up the political kingdom of God on earth for Jesus to take when Jesus returns again. And so because of that, Joseph will speak pretty freely. In fact, William Clayton records that while Joseph is talking about this, he's kind of beating a ruler on his hand and on the table as he's talking, and eventually snaps it over his knee. So you can see Joseph is a bit exercised as he's saying this. This is what Joseph is saying at the time. Quote, for the benefit of mankind and for succeeding the following generations, okay, Joseph wishes it to be recorded that there are many men of this honorable council who are not members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, neither do they profess any creed or religious sentiments whatsoever. To show them the organization of the kingdom, men are not consulted as to their religious options or notions of any shape, form whatsoever. We act upon the broad and liberal principle that all men have equal rights and ought to be respected, and that every man has a privilege in this organization of choosing for himself voluntarily his God and what he pleases for his religion. Inasmuch as there is no danger that every man will embrace the greatest light, This is the teaching that Joseph gives in Nauvoo on another occasion as well. When he's asking why does he allow preachers from other religions to come and preach to the people, he simply says that he doesn't believe the preachers are going to deliver any more light than he has for them. People will come back to where the greatest light is. God cannot save or damn a man, only on the principle that every man acts, chooses, and worships for himself. Hence the importance of thrusting from us every spirit of bigotry and intolerance towards a man's religious sentiments. That spirit which has drenched the earth in blood. Okay? When a man feels the least temptation to such intolerance, he ought to spurn it from him. It becomes our duty on account of this intolerance and corruption, because it is the inalienable right of a man being to think as he pleases, to worship as he pleases, being the first law of everything that is sacred. It is our duty then to guard every ground all the days of our lives. I will appeal to every man in this council, beginning at the youngest, that when he arrives at the years of a hoary age, he will have to say that the principles of intolerance and bigotry never had a place in this kingdom, nor in my breast, and that he is even then ready to die, rather than to yield to such things. Okay, that's very powerful language. Nothing can reclaim the human mind from its ignorance, bigotry, superstition, etc., but the grand and sublime principles of equal rights and universal freedom to all men. We must not despise a man on account of his infirmity. We ought to love a man more for his infirmity. End quote. Okay, so to me, he says that was one of the most beautiful sentiments of the 19th century. I agree. That's a very interesting and very egalitarian position in the 19th century. Joseph Smith was so far ahead of his time in terms of this type of thinking. But we have another quote. You have another super chat. Sorry. We have to read that really fast because that is my promise to you. Welcome. Oh, well, it's not a super chat. Dallas has joined us. Welcome to Rise Zion Level 2, Dallas. You've joined us as a member to the channel. Welcome, welcome. I appreciate that so much. Welcome. We're going to have some cool perks for you guys who are members coming up too. For Level 2, Level 2 members will get some additional discounts on our website for products every once in a while. So watch out for promo codes that we'll be sending out on YouTube. We'll send it out on the posts, I think, for Rise Zion Level 2 members only. So thank you for joining us. Let's see. I need to go here. Oh, look, we got somebody else. Oh, somebody sent a Rise Zion gift membership to somebody. That's awesome. I've never had that happen before. Let's see. Sent 5 Zion gifts memberships. Yeah, I don't know how this works, you guys. Like, do I have to choose who gets these memberships, or does Dallas choose where those memberships go? I don't really know how that works, but thank you so much for doing that, Dallas. So generous of you. Okay, we'll come back to this because we have to keep on reading. Okay, I think that we'll figure that out later, and I hope that I'm not doing something wrong here. Okay, so yeah, that is very generous. They sent it to, it looks like they sent it to Silja Tanner, and oh, they're randomly gifted to chat members. Okay, that's good to know. Okay. Awesome. No one chooses where they go. Okay, good. I have no idea how that works, so that's great to know. All right, let's continue reading this. We got to get through this, but thank you again for that. That's so awesome. I love this community. Let's continue. The next quote from Joseph Smith, that is also probably equally egalitarian. It says, "Nothing is more congenial to my feelings and principles than the principles of universal freedom, and it has been from the beginning. If I can know that a man is susceptible to good feelings and integrity, and that he will stand by his friends, he is my friend. The other thing that I'm afraid of is that I will not live long enough to enjoy the society of these my friends as long as I want to." Yeah, unfortunately, that was the case. "Let us from henceforth then drive from us every species of intolerance. When a man is free, he is then capable of being a critic." When a man is free, he is capable of being a critic. That is true. "When I've used every means in my power to exalt a man's mind and have taught him the righteous principles to no effect, and he is still inclined in his darkness, Yet the same principles of liberty and charity would ever be manifest by me as though he had embraced the gospel. Hence, in all governments and political transactions, a man's religious opinion should never be called into question. A man should be judged by the law independent of religious prejudice. Hence, we want in our Constitution those laws which require its officers to administer justice without regard to a man's religious sentiment or to thrust him out of office. Okay, that's a very important thing, too. And, you know, for so long, there was quite a lot of religious bigotry against Catholics, and they were not able to win political office. It wasn't until JFK where he had the first Catholic in a presidential office. So that's an interesting thing to say. So you get a little bit of insight there, of course. Joseph is someone who has suffered through religious intolerance and persecution from the time he first told everyone about the first vision, all throughout the growing persecution that would at least in part eventually lead to his murder. Only a few months later, he has very strong feelings about this and a beautiful sentiment that he expresses, that even if you're not able to convince everybody of the truthfulness of the things you have to share, even if they don't accept it, even after you've laid out all the best arguments you can possibly lay out, you should still love those people. They're still God's children. We'll all eventually know who we really are one day, and arguments about things today might seem much more semantic in that sense. So I thought I'd share that because I think that that's a great demonstration of Joseph Smith's character. It absolutely is. That's wonderful. I love that. I'm often asked about Joseph Smith, having worked on the Joseph Smith papers. And one of the things in his character that always comes through to me is his great love of the people. He was a lover of the people. He loved being around other people. He loved to be with other people. He loved to see other people happy. And oftentimes his love of other people led him to make terrible decisions, which as a historian, you can look back and say, no, don't trust John C. Bennett. Okay. So no, don't trust John C. Bennett. His ... But I believe that whatever one thinks of Mormonism, the sentiment that we should not despise someone because of their infirmity, but that we should love them more simply because they are infirm, is a beautiful sentiment that anyone can get behind. Anyone, whether they're a member of the church or not, whether they feel their way inside of the church or they feel themselves falling out, the love that we can show to one another, I think, is something we should all take away from the teachings of Joseph Smith. I will stop now and let you ask any questions, and then we get into the question and answer portion of this, you guys. So yeah, that is a really fascinating rundown of the minutes that were revealed recently by the church in August of 2017. Again, we're kind of discussing the possibility that maybe President Oaks might be, for those of you who are just joining us, we have a lot of people who are joining us even now in the chat. And what they're saying, just to get you caught up on what is going on. So we're talking about the possibility that President Oaks was prepared by the Lord to become prophet at this time, perhaps to rewrite the Constitution or to amend the Constitution in such a way that that it will be ready for Jesus Christ when he returns to reign as a king on the earth. So that's a very interesting idea because it's also based on a recent letter that I received from one of my viewers who claimed that a 70 had said, well, okay, so I have to back up. They're sending me a letter based on a video that they saw, okay, where a 70 said, and Jonathan Haystack also did a recent video on this, and you should watch that if you want to get a more complete rundown of it. Again, I want to just emphasize that it's very, very, I find it somewhat suspicious because of the fact that we don't have the name of the 70 who specifically said that. But what they said was that supposedly President Nelson had said that President Oaks would be the one to wrap things up, that after the dedication of the Salt Lake City Temple, there would be a great manifestation of God's power, and that at this time that Satan would throw his final tantrum because he knows that this is the very end, but that President Oaks would be the one to wrap things up, and that President Oaks, in fact, would be in a position to rewrite the United States Constitution to such an extent that it would be ready for Jesus Christ when he returned again. It's perfectly... it perfectly coincides with the studies that I've been doing with this Council of 50. So we continue, you guys, reading the question and answers. Let me know if you guys have any questions so far in the chat. Oh, Dustwave has joined us. Hi, Dustwave. How are you? I hope everything's going well, Dustwave. House of Israel says it's pertinent that the Lord chose the United States to restore his gospel. Yes, absolutely. We should never be afraid to affirm this. Yeah, absolutely true. Without the Constitution of the United States, it would not have been possible to restore the gospel in the first place. So that's a very important thing to point out. Dustwave Music says this is after all of the promised land. Awesome. Lindsay Black says, Dustwave, I'm doing all right. Thank you. I hope you and your family are doing well. Yes, me too. We are hanging in there. Things are looking up. Oh, that's good. I'm glad to hear that. Things are great. Glad to see you, Seth. Welcome, welcome, Dustwave. I'm glad to hear it. Okay. And Silja Tanner says, now I will be wondering how different the church would have been if it had started in Texas. Interesting. Yeah. Would have a headquarters maybe in Texas. Maybe they would never have, well, they were annexed by the United States eventually. I think that there's reason to believe that they would have been driven out of Texas as well. But things were a little bit wild in Texas for a bit there. Okay, well, let's continue reading this. Oh, who's in line after President Oaks? That would be President Holland. So, yeah, this is a fantastic topic, you guys. I'm glad that we kind of got these pieces put together to where it actually has some more relevant context to our day and age, you know, like to our right now. Yes, people headed by the same savior. Interesting. All right, let's read these question and answers. So we have some really fascinating question and answers here. So it says the first question is, do you think that let's read that again. Do you think then that we should stop saying that the Lord chose the United States to restore the gospel since there was religious freedom, since clearly our religion was so sorely persecuted? Okay, well, yeah, that kind of goes back into what we were just reading in the comments, right? And I think that that is not true. Let's read what the answer is. The answer is, that's a great question. I have no ability to deliver what we should or should not say as a historian, and I'm not very good one at that. I can merely state what the records say. In my opinion, the fact that the United States was the place that the church was restored is still something we can talk about. Clearly the United States has greater freedom of religion than any other place at the time, and it still has greater freedom of religion than any other place on the world, by the way. You can ask the many people who are executed or thrown in prison in Europe for expressing different religious views how much religious freedom they had. Okay, I think that we should probably modify a little bit the way that we talk about it. For Mormons today, American Mormons, we kind of have competing ideas. Most American Mormons feel very strongly their American patriotism as well as their Mormonism. They often want to see those two things expressed at the same time, and they often are. So it becomes a little bit difficult when we read about anything in the 19th century because however much the United States might have been the land of freedom when the church was founded, by the time of Joseph Smith's murder, they had come to the conclusion that the problem in the United States was that minority rights were not protected. And what good is it to say that you have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness if, in fact, anyone can take your life away, right? If anyone can take your right to the freedom of a religion, your liberty away. If you're in liberty jail, okay, or your life, in fact, which is what happened. I mean, so that's this it's just a cruel irony that the jail where Joseph Smith was placed was Liberty Jail. Okay, I think that, that's just that is just providential as well. It's just like Liberty Jail. Interesting. It's almost like, I don't know. That's very interesting to think about. I've never really kind of made that connection before. Any case, we continue. Or your life, in fact, which is what happened. So clearly the church was restored in the United States, and that is the fact of the matter. But you should probably also not be surprised to find Wilford Woodruff in the 1860s grumbling about how sinful the United States is, because at that point they felt pretty strongly against the actions that had been taken against them. Okay, that's true. So I mean, two things can be true at once. Okay. It is true that the United States had, and is the most religiously free country on the planet. Okay, there's no doubt about that. And it certainly has gotten better over the years rather than worse, I believe. But yeah, I mean, the struggle is real. The continuing struggle for religious liberty around the world continues to this day. It's not something that's over and the battle is just finished, right? I read a book. I had to read a book for college. It was the textbook. It was called the Struggle for Democracy, I think it was called. Even though we're technically a republic, not a democracy, but the title of the book was Our Struggle for Democracy, and it's all about, basically the struggle that exists in trying to balance competing interests in the United States. So we continue with the next question here. After Joseph Smith's death, is there discussion in the Council of 50 about who will succeed and how the next leader will be chosen? Okay, the answer. This is a very interesting question. The answer is there is a great discussion on it. Of course, the Council of 50 is functioning as an independent body separate from the Quorum of the 12. Often it doesn't appear very separate because all of the members of the Quorum of the 12 are members of the Council of 50. So they will often transact business that falls along similar lines. They will have a discussion in their earliest meetings after they get back together in which they will unanimously select Brigham Young to be the new chairperson of the council. He will take up exactly where Joseph is, and actually all of the people in the council will go around making the statement to the effect of, yes, Brigham Young is the person who should lead us now. They do have some bit of discussion about the other succession crisis that's going on at the time, and so they will talk about Rigdonism and things like that in the council, but they're talking about them more as outside events. There's no discussion in the council of what do you think, is Sidney Rigdon the guy? They don't have that discussion in the council. Okay, hold on just a second. Camera's acting up again. Hold on just a sec. The camera's acting up again. There we go. A silly thing. Okay, we got to get through these questions. Okay, and then our screen disappeared as well. There we go. All right. Question number 3. Though we chuckle at some of the understandably strong LDS pronouncements after the martyrdom, aren't these sentiments what led to the Mountain Meadows massacre? That's an interesting question. I don't think that I would agree with that. Let's continue. That would certainly be a gross oversimplification of the Mountain Meadows massacre. And whoever wrote the question, of course, you only had a small space to write it in. There are a myriad of both aggravating and mitigating events surrounding the Mountain Meadows massacre. To say that had John Taylor not been mad at the United States, that Joseph Smith was murdered, the Mountain Meadows massacre wouldn't have occurred, would probably not be a very accurate statement. That people who leave the United States have a shared collective memory of both mobs and organized military units conducting widespread depredations, murders, rapes, house burnings, farm burnings. If they hadn't had that, then that would probably be a much more deciding factor. Okay. So he's talking about the collective horrible things that happened to all of the saints. Certainly there's a case anecdotally, and you can get Rick Turley up here and have him speak about the Mountain Meadows massacre far better than me. There certainly is a case that some of the rhetoric leading up to the massacre, in part, it surrounds the fact that they are a people that have been persecuted and driven out. And so when people say things to the effect of there's an army on its way to destroy you, you take it seriously if you've gone through Hans Mill. You don't say, well, maybe you actually consider it a serious threat. There's no excuse for the horrific murders at Mountains Meadows Massacre. There are babies that were murdered, and there's no way to make that okay. It is terrible and it's horrific. It is a massacre and it's hard to deal with. Well-intended people sometimes make horrible, horrible, horrible mistakes. Unfortunately, in this case, the mistake they made was murder. And so I don't think that it's purely on the basis of any statements that are made. Far more is the fact that it is the shared collective experience of ongoing persecution that has a psychological effect on people that are there. Okay, so within that context, the Mountains Meadow Massacre becomes more understandable, even though it's still horrible. Yeah. Okay. Question number 4. At what point in Joseph's development did he transition from a third grade expression to becoming an eloquent orator and a profound thinker and philosopher? Interesting question. That's a really good question. We often say that Joseph had a third grade education. I don't know if he really had that. It's not like he went to grade school. Joseph is always intelligent. I think anyone who's a teacher can tell you that you can tell native intelligence inside of one of your students. Just because they don't know how to do multiplication tables, that's not actually evidence of someone not being intelligent. Okay, so once they're taught them, then they can use them, right? So Joseph, as is stated, only has the ground rules of those things, but he really sets himself to work trying to educate himself. You see this with their early attempts to learn Hebrew. Joseph becomes pretty well read, and by the time he's in Nauvoo, he seems to be reading a great deal, and that is all being soaked up. But if you read a letter from 1833, he writes a letter to the church in Missouri in 1833 where he's talking about the good doctor Philastus Hurlbut. Oh my goodness. What a name. Philastus Hurlbut. Oh my goodness. I need to highlight that name. That is hilarious. Okay, and there's probably not a grammatically accurate sentence in that letter. And there's almost no correct spelling. Even doctor is spelled wrong. Even Hurlbut is spelled wrong, which I'm fine with. Obviously, spelling is a little bit more fluid in the 19th century. Sometimes people say, oh, it didn't matter how they spelled things. That's not really accurate. They do have a way of spelling things, and it's pretty standard. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm just still on Hill. Is that name? Philastus Hurlbut. Can you imagine being called that? What was his parents thinking? Oh boy. Okay. Okay, I got the giggles now. That's not accurate. They do have a way of spelling things, and it's pretty standard way of spelling things. You can see this from newspapers. You don't pick up a newspaper and it spells church with an I. Honestly, this is one of my favorite misspellings of Joseph's early on in his life when he's writing something. A lot of the time he misspells church with an I. He spells it church. Okay, yeah, this is actually really fascinating, you guys. I've read some of his letters that he dictated himself, and he was trying to sound out the words as he has an accent, you guys. Okay, church. He has an accent. He pronounces church. Okay, it's so fascinating. He also misspells Edward Partridge's name all the time, leaving out the R. So it's Edward Partridge. Okay. Edward Partridge. Joseph's from Vermont, so my guess is that he has kind of a New England accent. He doesn't have a Utah accent. So I know that for many of you, that's going to cause you to lose your faith. To think of Joseph saying, me and Edward Partridge gonna go to the church. Maybe catch a Sox game. I can't. A Sox game. It was like from Brooklyn or something. I don't know if that's how he was talking about it, but Joseph, you can see in his writing that he certainly is becoming more well-read. He certainly is understanding. Even his efforts to alter and update the Book of Mormon in 1837. It's almost purely on the grounds of, I've learned that you probably shouldn't use the word that there. And he's trying to change it to make it more grammatically accurate. The best change that he makes in the 1830s to the Book of Mormon is he takes out dozens of "and it came to pass." So as often as you read it, it was actually way more than that. So he certainly becomes more proficient as time goes on, which is something you might expect from someone. Although I would say that still reading a letter from 1838, you would have a very hard time comparing that to the Book of Mormon and saying, oh, this is the same level of writing, even when he's making an effort. Okay, I apologize. I apologize if I didn't get to your question clearly. I deliberately didn't do it because we have in conspiracy theories. Okay. All right. So yeah, that is absolutely fascinating, you guys. I remember reading some of Joseph Smith's early letters, and he has an accent, and I realized that, and I was like, oh my goodness, he has an accent. Chet, Edward Partridge. Okay, he has a New England accent that sounds like he's from like the Bronx or something. Okay, and I just love this. And he's saying lump off. You don't like it, lump it. Okay, that's like, can you imagine him saying that in that accent? I love that. Okay. Let's continue here. Okay, so question number 5. What lessons from the Council of 50 can we apply to our ward and state councils? A5. Kind of the ones that were presented there. I don't know that we're trying to run our ward and state councils the way that Joseph talks about it. I know I've been in some where they weren't run that way. I'm not saying this is just because I'm a former bishop here. I had a former bishop from Colorado when I was getting a PhD there. I was never in his ward council because he never thought I was worthy because I was getting my PhD in history. I think one of the takeaways is that there is a real rushing in any meeting. It's not just a church meeting. In any meeting where you know people have different ideas and different responsibilities, there's a real tendency among, especially people trying to live a Christ-like life. And I'm not saying I'm one of those people. I try to be agreeable for agreeableness' sake. And when someone says, I think we should hold a pool party for the ward fundraiser, and you're thinking to yourself, that's the worst idea I've ever heard in my life, and instead you say, yeah, let's do that. And I think that what Joseph really wanted brought to the forefront is not that people should have long drawn out arguments, but that people should honestly express what they really feel. Listen to what other people actually have to say, and then, yes, you're going to have to come to consensus. This isn't like Martin Luther saying, here I stand, I can do no other, over the pool party, but that you can't properly make the best decision without everybody's input. Okay. Another example of how valuable Joseph thought other people were, you had to have the input of everybody, because only then in the hashing out could you actually say, that was a really good idea. But you know what? If I add a little bit of, that's actually an even better idea. Okay, so he, this is hard to read kind of. So he certainly thinks councils should function to be honest, to be open. And yes, another takeaway is once the council has made a decision, don't be the person going out of the ward council saying, well, I think the Relief Society made a really big mistake on that, and telling everybody in the ward that once the decision is made, try as best as you can to support it. And I think that's a pretty good takeaway. All right, and that was the end of that conversation. What a fantastic paper, you guys. I'm so glad that I found it, and I've been studying the Council of 50 a lot. Okay, let's see what we have in the chat, you guys. We're about ready to end this live stream for today. People are going to bed, probably. Tonight's stream has had some gems. I agree, you guys. Not least of which is the fact that Joseph Smith had a New Englander accent. Okay, you can take that to the bank. I knew this before reading this, and it's true. I've read some of his early letters and tried to sound out the letters that he's saying, like, why would he spell church with an I? Church. Okay. It's a church. It's not a church. It's a church. Isn't that fascinating? Hurlbutt. Yes, I love that name. Oh my gosh. We have to read that again. What was the first name? Hurlbutt. I highlighted it because that is just so hilarious. Philastrus Hurlbutt. What a name, you guys. Oh my goodness. Philastus. Okay. Oh, man. All right, let's go up here. I've missed a lot of the chat here. Let's see. Where are we going here? Things are great. Good to see you, Seth. Okay, Lindsay Black says, Dustwave, I'm so glad. I'm glad too. Okay. Oh, yes. How different would the church be if it had started in Texas? I remember that comment. That's a great comment. Elder Holland is after Oaks. This is amazing. Great topic. Thank you very much. I think so as well. Dustwave says it would be different. People headed by the same savior. Nothing happens by chance, though. There's a reason everything happened the way it did. Absolutely. Dustwave agreed. I'm sure you're right, says Silja Tanner. I'm sure you're right. This land was chosen and still is. Dallas, I'm sorry to hear about what happened to Dallas or in Arizona. Okay. I'm not sure what you're referring to there. Get his temple work done. Okay. Though we have lots of corruption, we by far have many freedoms no other country is blessed with. That's absolutely true. I love that. The Haystack says, you're right, Dustwave. Zach Strong says, Brother Smith suffered not because there were loopholes in the Constitution, but because people didn't apply it. I don't know if I agree with that, Zach. I think that the fact that they had to, I mean, like in an ideal world, in a perfect world, right? But the Constitution was written specifically because they knew that people were imperfect. And they missed that. They missed the fact that the states wouldn't necessarily protect the rights in the same way that the federal government was forced to protect the rights. That was an oversight. I think that it's only obvious looking in hindsight, right? In other words, so this was something that they had to go back and they had to specify again. No, and it actually was intentionally made that way because of the fact that they wanted more rights to be applied to the states rather than the federal government. Okay. We have nowadays a much more strong federal government where all states are required to submit their state constitution to the federal government in order to have that ratified by the federal government. Okay. So all state constitutions are, in fact, approved and approved and ratified. I don't know if that's the right word, by the U.S. Constitution. For example, the state constitution can't come up with a law that overrides the federal constitution anymore. They used to could be able to do that. But yeah, we'll continue here. Dustwave says, the Haystack, Jonathan, good to see you, man. Loved your video earlier. Looks like he's having some technical difficulties. Well, yes, we were having some technical difficulties. The Doctor Who Flygon, I think I just caught up. Oh, great. Okay, that's great news. Dustwave says, hold on, guys. He'll get it fixed. Absolutely. It's just a small thing. When the camera gets detached, it's usually because the artificial intelligence is popping up on my phone and trying to be helpful, but it turns off the camera. So, yeah, Zeitbarth has joined us. See him, Zeitbarth? Well, hi, everyone. Welcome. Sil just says, quick, someone give us a topic. Greetings. Talk amongst yourselves. Hi, Dustwave. Yep. Okay, House of Israel says, a little known fact about the Mountain Meadows massacre is that those who settled Mountain Meadows were also family of those killed on Hans Mill. Ooh, that's interesting. Very interesting. The Mountain Meadows massacre was inexcusable, and there were extenuating factors as well. Yes. Yes, indeed. Hello, Zeitbarth. Lindsay Black says, House of Israel says, I've done a lot of books on the mountain, or you've read a lot of books, or you've written a lot of books. I would be interested to hear about that. There's far more to that story than anyone will understand in this lifetime. Absolutely. I think that unless you actually lived through it, it's impossible to know exactly what was going through with their minds, right? The Doctor Who Flygon says, hurl butt. That's so funny. House of Israel. Read, not done. Oh, okay. Okay, read them. Excellent. Lindsay Black says, Mountain Meadows Massacre was not okay or acceptable, but I can imagine perhaps some PTSD played a big role. Absolutely. Still just says, I stayed as long as I could, but it's 11 here in San Antonio. I understand. We have to end this, you guys. Hurlbutt. Yes. Good night, all. All right. Well, good night. We're getting to be very late, so we better end this live stream. You guys put in your last comments, your last super chats if you want to get a super chat in before we end tonight's live stream. Lindsay says tonight's stream has had some gems. Absolutely. I've absolutely loved being here with you guys tonight. Great comments as well. It's always helpful when you guys have great comments so that we can have a good conversation together. And I enjoy that very much. PTSD did play a role, but it was still inexcusable. That's right. Silja said, thanks. See you, Silja. House of Israel said, can you remind us what the recent large apostasy was? I think I might have missed that comment. I don't remember anybody referencing the large apostasy. Oh, maybe you're referring to the apostasy when the bank, or the, what was it? The Safety Society crashed and everybody was saying that Joseph was a false prophet and all this stuff was happening. And then everybody, like almost, I think it was about 1/3 of the leadership of the church apostatized, and that became known as like another great apostasy in the church. But yeah, that was, I don't know if that's what you're talking about. Maybe you are. House of Israel says many were not brought to justice for the Mountain Meadows massacre. It was an odd parallel of Joseph and others being murdered and no one being tried. Zeitbarth, I think you're referring to Chris Zeitbarth. You're welcome to look up the talk by President Monson. Okay, I'm not sure what you're referring to. I don't remember the exact wording. Dr. Velastus Hurlbutt. Doctor. Wow, his parents didn't think that through. No, they did not. Probably not. Dustwave says, Beverly says, hi, Augusta in Georgia. I'm only about 30 minutes from you. I attended the Augusta Ward for many years. That's awesome. Willing says, Orson Pratt said the Constitution of the United States is as firm as the Rock of Ages. Discourse, October 26, 1879. Charles Lynn said, God bless. Dustwave says, hope you all have a great night. Was great seeing all of you. God bless you all. That's wonderful. Dustwave, thank you so much. And I got to tuck the Kinzit. Have a great night. All right. Well, that's the end of the chat, you guys. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining us tonight. I'm going to switch over here, even though the camera is gray and ugly and in 72 PPI or whatever that is. 720 a resolution. So you can see that I'm quite blurry and have no color. All right. But yeah, thank you guys so much for being here tonight. Before you go, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Our new goal is to reach 60,000 subscribers in 3 months, and we are well on our way to reaching that goal, you guys. So thank you. Thank you for being here in our live stream tonight, every Thursday evening. Check out our website, risezion.org, to pre-order t-shirts. The scriptures do speak of a last days apostasy. House of Israel. Well, maybe that's what they were talking about, because they did refer to it as a great apostasy when 1/3 of the church leadership fell away from the church because of how they put it in the Doctrine and Covenants is because of financial speculations, right? A spirit of speculation had gripped the people in and around Kirtland. Picture looks good from here. That's good to say. Thank you so much for that. That's good. All right. Well, we're going to end tonight's live stream, you guys. Again, thank you. We'll talk to you tomorrow. All right. We'll see ya.